Evening, everybody. Can you hear me okay?
Roller stock method. So
that was today?
Yeah, that was today.
Amazing. So second question that people ask me every day, right, is can you do this with a W-2? And although I did it with a W-2, now I don't. So I feel like I'm not the best example. Brenda just said she works 12-hour shifts, right? So if Brenda can do it, guys, with 12-hour shifts, then it's not a question of if, but it's a question of how, right? We know.
George's face is classic. All right, I'll give a few more minutes to everybody to pile in, see if we have any additional people that are going to be hopping in, then we'll start going through it.
I thought that was you talking, Jim, right now, and I was like, how come the lips are
somebody up?
Yeah, the lips are not matching, you know, and I think he sounds a little bit different on the phone.
No, it wasn't me.
Okay, cool. Well, thank you. If you haven't heard already, thank you for giving up your time and, sharing the wealth and kind of seeing where this
100%.
can go.
1000%. I hope that I can bring some value to you guys, and we'll get into it shortly. I'm just going to allow a couple more people that are straggling in to join, and hopefully I can shed some light on underwriting and what we're looking at from at least a buyer's perspective, and we'll kind of go through how this can be applicable to if you're a private money lender, if you are if you're a wholesaler yourself. Really, it'll apply across all levels.
Got it.
All right. And I have one of my trusty colleagues, Haley, who will be monitoring the chat because I am awful at that. I am nowhere near like Pace's level of being able to monitor the chat on a Zoom and be able to present at the same time. So
one day,
maybe. All right, we're just allowing some more. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. Can everybody see my screen okay?
Yes, sir.
All right. All right, I got some more people that are coming in. From Dress the Bird. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started here. So I'm Jim Labella. I'm on a team with Jeff McGrew, Haley, who's in the crowd, and also James Zeger. And we are predominantly buy and hold investors. So we predominantly focus on buying long-term rentals, mid-term rentals, and co-living or Padsplit.
No, boo. Boo.
I think someone's not
No,
muted.
that is not nice. No.
Not your nickname, James.
My nickname is not Boo. So we're predominantly buy and hold investors, and we buy pretty much all over the country. We do have a couple of no-fly states, but I won't go into that. That we just absolutely will not go into, like California and Oregon, Washington, New York, New Jersey. There's a couple of states, a handful of states that we won't go into. But what I wanted to do today is to kind of give you a peek behind the curtain of what it's looking like from a buyer's perspective to underwrite properties. And this can be applicable to you, whether you're a buy and hold investor like myself, or whether you are a wholesaler trying to get your deals dispoed. Also being a private money lender or a private money partner. This is great information. Obviously, in the beginning parts of when we initially do our kind of surface level test on a property that we receive from our network of wholesalers, that will be more applicable to you as a wholesaler because you don't have to go in as much depth as that. But it's really good to see like what a buyer is actually doing behind the scenes when you are trying to, assign the property that you have just gotten under contract. So we'll kind of go through this. I'm going to go through this with pretty much every week. I'm going to go through a case study of a property we have either purchased or we have not purchased. There's many more properties that we have not purchased. So I probably will be heavily focusing on that just because it's good to get that perspective of what is not a deal. And from our internal metrics, we have really found that the majority of the deals that we end up reviewing never end up getting sold. So about 60% of them from our point of view and our metrics are not getting assigned. They're probably getting their EMD back and they're going back to the seller and they're on their journey again. So, this can bleed over into assisting, wholesalers with, we have a person that's behind this house that's usually in some sort of a pain point. That's why they're creatively trying to get rid of their property. And with that being said, if a wholesaler drags them through and doesn't end up assigning that and selling it, typically they're just going to get their EMD back, but that person is in a predicament and nothing has been resolved and you've wasted, 3 or 4 weeks of their time. And if not longer. But so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through a couple of case studies each session. This one will take a little bit longer, so I'm going to focus on this one for tonight. But this was a property that was in Little Rock, Arkansas, and this came to us from a wholesaler who I'm pretty familiar with and friendly with. He is not in Sub 2. He is not in Gator. He is not associated with any community. And I'll point out a couple of caveats where that was an issue. And we'll start digging into it. So we had this property that came to us, and this is how it was presented to us. It was a subject to deal. It was a purchase price of about $157,000. The entry fee was $8. This is how we get things often. Let me back that up for a second. This is how we often get things. Is we will just get what the entry fee is. There's no breakdown. We'll just get kind of the bare bones of the deal. And we have to kind of go through after we've done our initial analysis. We have to kind of go through and either ask the wholesaler to break it down, or we have to split it apart ourselves and do a little bit of a reverse engineering on it. But the entry fee was listed at $18,000 plus closing costs plus the TC. The principal and interest, taxes and insurance were about $1,400, and that was inclusive of this being an FHA loan, and it had two components to it. It had a first that had about $142,000 left on it. Not a bad interest rate, not the best, but not the worst by far. 4.8, basically 4.9. And then the second mortgage, which was their down payment assistance, that had a remaining balance of a little bit over $10,000. So it came to us with very limited pictures, very little detail on it, and we were taking a look at this. So initially put everything through an initial kind of, we term as the sniff test. And so we just take a look at it to see if it's going to be worth our time to really deeply underwrite it, because it obviously takes a good deal of time to underwrite properties and to underwrite them correctly. So it was a 3-bedroom, 3-bath. This is what it was presented to us. It was 3-bedroom, 3 full bath, 17, 16 square feet. There was no balloon, and it was basically turnkey that had newer air conditioner, new HVAC, and there was minimal rehab that was needed on it. So let me just let some people in here. And so this is what it was presented to us as. What we initially do, it was, we take a look at it. This was a very clean house from the limited pictures that we had gotten. And it, from the initial information that we had received, it was really a perfect pad split. Just the way the layout of this property was, with this room over here easily enclosed. You can make 2 bedrooms here that were easily enclosed, and there was minimal walls, floating walls that needed to go up. This was going to be a kind of a question mark on the right-hand side, if you're seeing where my cursor is to be able to create a hallway here, if there was enough space, because I don't have any dimensions at this point, and see if we could put another room in there for us to be able to technically make this an 8-bedroom. But we ended up going to 7-bedroom, and I'll kind of walk through the process of what that looks like. But overall, it looked like a very clean house. These were older pictures that we had come to find out before the previous sale. And it was really perfect for co-living. And it needed a little bit of work, and probably from the initial pictures, we should have picked up on the fact that this one down here in the right-hand corner is not doesn't look like a full bathroom, but we figured that it was presented as a full bathroom, that it was just, it was cut off in the pictures. So that should have probably been a tip off right there, but that's why you do your due diligence, and you start getting boots on the ground with any property that you're looking to buy or to wholesale to coming through. So what the actuals ended up being was we had sought some more information to get some more details from the wholesaler, and it had come to find out that they broke down their entry fee for us. Some wholesalers will, some wholesalers will not. They don't like to let you know what their assignment is on it. I mean, we're going to eventually figure it out. But, you know, to each their own, that's totally fine. But this particular wholesaler ended up breaking it down for us. So they had about 5,000 in arrears at that point that we were looking at it. And the agent was getting a little bit of a cut. The seller was getting a little bit of about $5,000, and they were $3,000 in arrear at this point. So tip number one, that when I'm looking at these, coming from a wholesaler perspective as a buyer, if somebody's in arrears and they are already out of this house because it was vacant, so to give a seller to structure your deal where they're getting over $5,000 for that, unless there's an extenuating circumstance, that is not typically something that a buyer wants to see, and they are going to push back on that, which we did immediately. I mean, they're already behind in their payments. You're helping them out. You're getting this property moved, and really, unless you're giving them a couple of $1,000s for moving costs, or like I said, there's an extenuating circumstance, there's absolutely no reason that this should have been structured with giving that seller $5,300. So coming in here, this is what some of the ideas that we had on this pad split that we had started to move into motion for getting the contractors in there. So we had boots on the ground that were getting in there to get us more video, and simultaneously I happened to get a contractor in there pretty quickly. Sometimes that happens. It's usually it's one before the other. I'll usually get more details, and I'll find somebody locally to take some video, take some additional pictures of real time, and get those over to us. I will also do what is called a Cubicasa. I don't know if anybody has ever heard of that or used it. It's an app on your phone that is absolutely phenomenal. And I didn't have an opportunity before the contractor was able to get in there to do that. But as a rule of thumb, I always usually get that. And it basically will scan the house with whoever you have on boots on the ground to take pictures and video. They walk around the property with their phone and it scans it and it gives you a floor plan. And it's absolutely phenomenal. It's free in most cases. And once you start going over a certain amount, it'll start charging you. But
What's the app called
it's
again?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What's the app called again?
Cubi Casa. It's CUBI
Oh, QB
CASA.
Casa. Okay,
Yep.
cool.
It's absolutely phenomenal. So if you're not using it and you
Sounds
need
like
to
a
get a
game
floor
changer.
plan on something, I highly suggest getting that app and having whoever you have go out scan the property, especially if you're getting into the co-living area and you're getting into pad splits, because you can download those floor plans and then you can put them into another piece of software, or you can do it you can do it online, where you're starting to move bedrooms or you're starting to add walls and things of that nature. So it's huge. I didn't have a chance to do that, so I kind of did this willy-nilly. But we had plans to put up just a few walls downstairs. This ended up being too tight, which I thought from the pictures of getting in the additional bedroom or 2 bedrooms that were coming in over here. So we were able to get 3 additional bedrooms downstairs. And then we had upstairs that we ended up splitting that huge that master bedroom in half. With Padsplit and co-living, what you have to have is you have to have 2 egresses for every single occupied room. So it's 80 square feet. That is the minimum that they have to be. And they have to have 2 egresses. So typically that's a window that's large enough for a person to fit out. It's for fire reasons, or it could be a door. This particular bedroom was really long and it was a perfect split. The problem was that this was a door, and if you remember the pictures from prior here, that's that door from upstairs, and that was considered an egress. So we were going to basically just put in a door that had a piece of glass on the top to allow some light in there, so it wasn't completely pitch dark. And besides the light, yeah. So we had really good plans on this house. This looked like a very, very strong property for us to convert into a pad split. So the thing with pad split is they are not in every single market. And basically what they have is they have core markets. I think there's probably, 18 or 20 core markets that they have. And then they have a list of 100 pad split anywhere markets. And so with that for anybody who's out there wholesaling, if you're putting your deals out there and saying this is a perfect pad split, this is a perfect co-living opportunity, that's great, but provided to make sure that it is, because they kind of switched gears, which they've been doing a lot, and we'll talk about that a little bit on some of the mechanics of the financials. But they used to do pad split anywhere. So if it was anywhere that they would deemed fit, they would accept it into the pad split program. They have stopped doing that, and they really are going for about a 30 to 35 mile radius outside of their top 100 pad split anywhere cities. And if it's outside of that, at this point, they are not looking at any other properties in any other markets, unless you, I guess, probably could plead your case and say that this is an upcoming market. But they're really getting kind of strict on that. Zach is the pad split anywhere director of operations, and I've become actually very close with him. I text him all the time. I probably am a huge pain in the ass to him because I'm always texting him, asking him about markets and things like that. So in this particular market, the pad splits were there was one pending pad split, and this was a brand new emerging market that was in their pad split 100. That was a brand new emerging market that didn't have any live pad splits at that point. And so when we were discussing it, and they really wanted to see how well Little Rock, Arkansas was going to do, is we really didn't have a lot of meat on the bone to go with as far as what rent rates were going to go per week for Padsplit in that market, because there was just one on there. It has now subsequently come down. I just looked the other day, and there's no longer any Padsplits within the Little Rock or the North of Little Rock metro area. It's probably about 45, 50 miles away in another smaller city that was probably pre their decision to change their Padsplit anywhere model. But that kind of limited us. And I'll give you a little bit of a peek once we start going into the actual numbers on the main co-living analysis. That kind of where Padsplit pulls their numbers from if they don't have an existing market and or a lot of volume in that market. That'll probably help a lot of you out. So on my calculator that I have built for the team to underwrite, we have what was the quick analysis, which is the initial, basically the sniff test. We can break it down into long-term rental, midterm rental, co-living. This is all of our exits. We can do creative or cash. We can, flip between the two of those. I am not by any means saying that other exits aren't viable and they're not worthy of underwriting. You would basically just need to plug in those numbers for whatever the exit may be, or whatever your buyers and your buyer pool is looking for. So it would be really easy to, when you're starting to get into the nitty gritty and into the meat and potatoes of this, is just adjusting it to what that exit is. Those happen to be our exit, but as you can see with this is not gonna make it. It's gonna negatively cash flow right out of the gate for what the total debt service was on it. There's no HOA on that. My opinion on HOAs is steer clear of them with co-living. There is technically a way around that because you're going into contract with Padsplit, and so there technically is a long-term lease in there, and they're the one finding members that are going in there to stay whatever duration of time that they're going to be there. But my suggestion is that you stay away from the HOAs, because even if you get around the fact that you have a longer than, most HOAs have like a 6-month or sometimes 3-month or a 12-month lease. You technically have that with Padsplit, but the issue is once you have all of those people in those properties, and usually it takes about 6 to 7 bedrooms to become profitable with the new fee structure that we'll talk about shortly, that Padsplit has come out with, that a lot of people are grumbling about, to be honest with you. And it really made it extremely difficult to underwrite them. And I'll show you why in a minute. But the HOAs are typically a no-go zone for us. So if it has a HOA, we immediately will pretty much eliminate it from being a potential Padsplit. But on this particular example, you can see that this was negatively cash flowing after you get in all of your entry and all of your carrying costs and all of your actual costs that are associated. So when you're coming into a property, the 7 main pillars that pretty much everybody, is the go-to of things that you're looking for what your costs are going to be, is not just the debt service. There's plenty of other costs, but the 7 main pillars are really, the cash to the seller, arrears or liens, your acquisition costs, and that could be internal like we have, and also can be external like the wholesalers that are out there for your assignment fee. You have closing costs, you have holding costs, you have the renovation and repair costs, and then you have your marketing and exit costs. So there's really 7 main pillars, but there's technically a lot more. And once you get into my deep dive portion of this, you'll kind of see that of where the additional costs are coming in for a buyer. And when wholesalers present their properties, we love them. We live and breathe by wholesalers. But the problem is a lot of times what they will do is they will just take the current principal, interest, taxes, and insurance and subtract that from from what their potential rents are. They just go on Zillow and take a stab at it on Zillow Manager, and they basically produce their numbers from that. And that is not entirely the case. That is not entirely what is facing a buyer for when you're going to dispo this. So really quickly, you can see that this one was negatively cash flowing annually about $13,000. So it was a no-go for a long-term rental. Midterm rental, pretty much the same story. It's not a very hot market for midterm rentals where this particularly was in the city. So that had a negative return on it as well. It was a little bit better, but it was still a negative return every year. But once we started getting into co-living, we started taking a look at that. So what my initial underwriter had done was he had taken a look at what that market had. And we'll go into this in a little bit more detail as we go through the different block stages that we have for underwriting. Is the Padsplit that was currently there that was coming online, they will typically put what that range is for the rooms. If it's even if it's not an established one, it'll be like coming soon, something like verbiage according to that, and it'll say room rentals anywhere from $170 to $190 per week. So you can kind of get a rough estimate from that, and sometimes that's the only thing that you have. But I'll go into that a little bit deeper when you don't have a market that is supporting it, so that you can determine, to the best of your ability, what others are getting for pad splits, because there aren't any, or they're not live and active. But as you can see, this was pretty well. He was pretty much on the mark, and that's what the other property that was there at the time had on there. It was about 100. It was 170, I believe, to $176 a week. And so if we can get 7 bedrooms in and we could add 4, because it was an existing 3, we'd have a pretty good spread every single month. So this is the initial sniff that we take everything through. And we, like I was saying, we get properties presented to us all different ways. Sometimes it's very brief, like this particular one happened to be, where it's just, we know what the entry ask is. We don't know what the breakdown is. We know the PITI. We don't know what the breakdown of that is. And we basically get very limited other information besides that. So the entry fees so this, our initial sniff test, we're looking at the financials up at the top. So this particular one, based on the weekly rates that my underwriter had come up with, this was generating about $5,100 a month in rental income, providing all the rooms were rented. The PITI was $1,396. There was no HOA. There was no other liens. I just buckled those all together because that's, at that point, that's all we knew. Is that their total PITI was $1,396. So their total debt service was $1,396, and that left us about a $3,700 spread. We don't, when it's a creative deal or either seller financing or a sub-2 transaction or a hybrid, we don't initially go and look up the ARV. That's done in the further parts of this. And I'll touch on that a little bit going through this. But the ARV it's important, but it's not of utmost importance, because you're really looking at this, whether it's a creative deal, is you're looking at this from a cash flow perspective. And your buyers are looking at this from a cash flow perspective. And so we don't necessarily spend a lot of time going through the ARV initially until we see if it's worth us taking a further look at. So as we
Are you ready?
Go,
Let's do it. All right, here we go.
I gotta mute somebody. I think I took care of it.
First of all, thank you both for building this vision. I really put together this deck so that I could share it. Yeah, both, right? You both know my passion for Ferrari, how I want to build it.
All right, got him. Okay, so as we go through this for the initial test, this doesn't take very long at all. It's basically putting in all of the information that we have currently from the wholesaler, and we're putting this in to accommodate for what we know are going to be entry fees into this. We'll go through this in much more detail as I go through our deep dive. But when we had come down to the bottom of this one, we had potentially seen that it was going to be about 61,000 to get into this after construction costs, and assignment fees and everything as it was structured right now, plus some of the incidentals that people don't realize are part of it, like our holding costs. Our holding costs on a pad split, we usually put in there for about 6 months. That's a good, I mean, no pun on words, but it's a good padding. So it's 3 months until we will get tenants in there and be live on a long-term rental or a midterm rental. And it's 6 months on a pad split. And the reason for that is it gives them time for us to find, on the long-term midterm rental side, it'll give us time to find the property management company, allow them to get tenants in, get it rent ready, all of those things. And then 6 months is a good time frame with construction, and then getting Padsplit to market it and get people in and start having a full house. So that's why we do that. And coming down at the end of this, it was looking at about a 9.2% cash on cash return. So we want to take a look at anything. This is just internal. This is our preferences. Is anything that's over an 8% cash flow, a cash on cash return, we want to put it into deeper underwriting. And so we want to take a look at it to see if it's a potential deal or not. If it had a negative cash flow like it had on the long-term or midterm rental side, we will generally respond back to the wholesaler saying, hey, this isn't a deal for us. Thank you very much. These are the reasons why. And we at least give them some heads up as to why we are not buyers on that. It's just a good courtesy, and also it can turn into a deal. We've got one that we are currently under contract with right now that initially started out like this. It was a poor cash flow, a cash on cash return, and we ended up working with the wholesaler or the owner who had it, and it ended up turning into a deal. So you never know when you're providing feedback to the wholesalers whether that's going to change, because there can be some modifications in any of those points with the with their cash to close for this portion here, which is what I termed it. So total cash to close, that's really when we get the quote unquote entry fee, and it really shouldn't be deemed that and called that. But the cash to close is what the wholesaler is indicating is everything, including everybody getting paid, including them as the wholesaler with the assignment fee. So this actually moved into and piqued our interest. So we had moved this over to our further analysis, and I have these broken down into. I know it's very busy. It's a pretty elaborate spreadsheet that we utilize to deep dive underwrite on these. But we have one for long-term rental, we have one for midterm rental, and we have one for co-living. Other exit strategies definitely can be added. I was planning on doing that just as a just to fully build it out and potentially put this out into the market, because there's been a lot of hours been put into this, and it's really a great analysis tool for anybody who's extensively underwriting, and I'll kind of take you through it. So over here, we have our sub-2 and seller finance base costs. So this is everything that is currently in the property right now as far as the debt service to it. So we have to commonly go down to the existing mortgage, and once we find out what the remaining balance is, what the interest rate is, we can kind of reverse engineer that, providing there's no barrier to it, but we can usually reverse engineer that to a point if we don't have it provided to us from the wholesaler. Number one, we can reverse engineer it to a point where we can understand what the breakdown exactly is for principal and interest, taxes, and then insurance, and then if there's any additional PMI, if there's any HOA fees, if there's other liens and loans, we can see those pretty quickly once we do the math in here, and it pretty much does it for you. But this is kind of going into where our projected income is coming in. So where we had come up with this for the rate comp analysis is, I don't know if anybody is aware of that, but I will just show you very quickly, and I'll pick a market. This is the market that I actually live in. And if you are a host on Padsplit, and you don't have to have a property to be a host, you can set up a host account and just let it sit there and not have any properties in it whatsoever. But you are able to get, number one, market insights, and you're able to see a little bit better of a visual than you can with looking by room on the Padsplit site. So if if you want to, you can sign up very easily with Padsplit. And like I said, there's no financial commitment. There's nothing that you have to have a property that's in there. You can just basically go in here and set this up. The cool thing that they had just really started developing more is this market insights button. I depend on this a lot for me to take a look at it. So this is looking at Phoenix, and it's looking at all of the units. Now that's a number of doors that are active across all of the houses there. So you can see the number of units, you can see the demand that they have for searches on their website or to the company, to Padsplit, of how many have, that's pretty high, 7,500. That's a pretty high number of searches. So there's obviously demand. But the best feature about this is where you can see that they're in blue. The ones that are in blue have Padsplits in them, and they have active doors that are in there. And sometimes it takes a few minutes to click in there, but you can see it split up by zip code, and you can actually get what the average room prices are in that zip code. You can see the occupancy rates, and that is huge. So Padsplit in general, they promote that they have a 90% occupancy across all of their organization. It's probably more likely it's around 85%, and that's what we use when we don't have a reference for that zip code. Is we usually use about a 15% vacancy, but we'll get to that in a second. So you can come in here and you can get what the weekly room rates are, what the average is, then with a private bath, and then with a shared bath. So we typically, until we actually go into the property and start splitting it out, like, hey, this has a private bath, this has a private entrance, etc., we'll usually keep it at what the shared bath is, just for our numbers being conservative. But obviously you can do whatever you want with your underwriting. But that's what we do, just to make sure that we're padding ourselves a little bit, because more than likely one of the bedrooms is going to have a private bath. But like in the case that we were looking at right now, in this case study, we actually didn't. The way we had arranged the house is there was going to be no shared bathroom. So I just wanted to kind of show everybody that's a huge tool to be able to leverage and utilize. And it's been monumental. But in this particular case, we had that Padsplit that was coming on board. We had the rent ranges that were for it. And after I talked to Zach, I was going to be the second property that was in the Little Rock market at this time. So with that being said, we kind of went back and forth. And what Padsplit does is they use Zumper and they use Rent Cafe, and they go to a studio apartment, or sometimes a one bedroom if they don't have studios in that zip code, a studio or a one bedroom apartment, and they take about 20 to 25% off of that. And that's how they set their rates for a brand new market. They're kind of throwing darts at a wall in some cases. And so after I had a discussion with Zach on this particular property, we settled that it was probably going to rent for about $186 a month. A week, and that's where we felt comfortable with. He wanted to push me up further. He was saying that I could probably get about $1,000 to $1,100, and because the studio apartment's unfurnished, right? You have to pay for utilities and things of that nature. We kind of went back and forth about it, but we ended up going a little bit more conservative, that it would be about $800 a month that we'd be able to get for each room. And he felt comfortable with that. I felt comfortable with it. And that's basically how they take a look at it. You can use Zillow Room Rentals or something else like Roomies, and start to get a little bit of a feel for it, but it's just not great in my opinion. You absolutely can use them if you wish, but they're just not. They're not fantastic in the fact that a lot of them are on there and they require like a 6 or a 12-month lease, and there's just different parameters that are with some of these Zillow room rentals that you can find online right now. This market didn't have any, so I had no reference to it whatsoever. But we settled on about 186 a week that we would be able to get for the room. So we had a pretty decent cash flow. We had about a $5,600 a month cash flow that was coming through here. And I thought with the layout of this property, it was going to be a lot less in construction because, let me mute somebody. All right. Yeah. So with the floating walls that were going to be going up, and having 3 full bathrooms that we had thought at the time, I didn't think that it was going to be an issue with the construction costs. What we basically utilize for construction costs, and I'll go through down to my entry fees. What we basically use for construction costs is Padsplit is pretty heavy on the fact that it's about $5,000 a room for construction. We have found that it's been more around the lines of about 7,500, about 7 to 7,500 per room. And that's going to be inclusive of not only the walls, but you have to remember that in some cases you have to put in wiring for a new light switch, outlets, door locks, fans. Sometimes you have to repipe some HVAC units to make sure that they have a vent in each room, which is mandatory. So we're a little bit conservative, I'll admit that, but we tend to put it at about 7,000 to 7,500 a room. And then a bathroom is a little bit different. A bathroom is, I have never gotten a quote from anybody that we have utilized and contractors across numerous properties for putting in a bathroom for less than about $13,000 to $15,000. If you're redoing the plumbing and there's no existing bathroom, I don't agree that it's about 8,000 to 10,000. It's more like 13,000 to 15,000. And that's just backed up from the quotes that I've gotten from numerous contractors in numerous markets. But you could go in here and you could set your parameters to however you wanted. But coming down here to this is, we discovered that this bathroom was a half bath. It was just a toilet and a sink. So we had to get a shower into that bathroom. And these prices here are after quotes coming in from the contractor. They're not our initial ballpark estimates that we typically put in there, that was done beforehand. But this is actual numbers that we are coming across. It was about $4,600 to add that bath because it was too small inside the actual bathroom. So we had to bang out into where there was a walk-in, where there was a huge closet in that hallway going in from like the main foyer area to that small bathroom. And so we're utilizing that space, but we had to do some extensive plumbing to get it in there, and it ended up being about $4,600, which is probably about right for adding a bath, for adding half a bath. But the construction costs on the actual rooms, and to segregate those rooms and to get all the fans in, and we had minor venting that needed to be redone. That ended up being a little bit over budget at about 32,000. So we're at 36,000 already coming into this, with even with negotiating the cash to the seller getting pulled. The wholesaler agreed. He had talked to the seller and the agent, and they were okay with that, and we were going to redraw the contract. The furnishing costs, we typically put that at about $5 a square foot for the entire house. And why do we do that? So Padsplit will typically say it's about $1,000 to furnish the room. But it doesn't really take into contemplation the additional expenses that are considered furnishing the house. It might not have a washer dryer. You might need to get an extra washer and dryer because there's 7 or 8 people in there and one washer dryer is not going to work. All of the locks, all of the smart locks that need to go on there, all the doors that need to go in there, and the bed, desk, the closet, if it doesn't already have one, like all of those things need to be taken into consideration. And really, a common area where you have some table and chairs. If you have a large space, like in this particular property that we would have potentially had, we were going to make a little small common area, which is typically not the best thing to do, because they will congregate in there and they will, typically that's where Padsplit roommate tension flares if you have too much of a common space for them to hang out in. But this property would it would have been empty space. So we ballparked that at about $5 a square foot, and that's usually pretty spot on. The agent commission, we had talked about the repairs. So if you had noticed on the last screen that I had, we had our typical repairs because we thought it was turnkey, that it was going to be just a patch and a couple of paint areas and we'd be good to go in the other parts of the house. Well, it comes to find out that they had a extensive water leak in the laundry room and there was mold and we had to have all of that ripped out. We had to have it repiped for an additional washer dryer unit. And there were some various other things that were inside the house, but the biggest expense for this, also the driveway from the pictures looked like it was not in the best condition, but it was okay. The thing was completely crumbled. And we had to redo the driveway, basically, either to rip it out and put gravel or we had to re-cement it. But the biggest thing is all 3 of the contractors that ended up going through there, they found that there was something wrong with the foundation and there was stress cracks on every single window and every single door. There was unevenness in the property for the floors. So there was obviously some settlement and there was a concern with all 3 of them that I had go through there. Cause that's typically what we'll do is we'll have 3 to 4 contractors to give us bids to get the best quote and also, make sure someone's not screwing you. And all 3 of them had said the same thing. And so we were planning on getting a quote for what the foundation repair would be. And one of the contractors actually had a good friend that was a foundation guy. And he said a minimum for what you're describing is going to be about $10,000. So at that point, we added $15,000 on top of this in unexpected repairs and condition of the house. And so that bumped up our total entry to almost $100,000. And so these are the things that when people are evaluating it at a wholesale level, you don't need to go into that much of a detail if you're a wholesaler, where, I'm basically going down to the penny almost. That'd be more for buyers or a private money lend or a private money partner. But these are things that you should be aware of with your entry costs for your buyers that they're going to be facing. And that is going to go into your assignment of what you're asking for that particular property. And if it's a deal, if it's going to be able to be moved. And so this line here that I have is an acquisition fee is we have to pay our team, right? So we pay ourselves to purchase properties. So it can range anywhere from a few $1,000 where we've completely eaten it, all the way to $20,000 where the deal had enough room, where we were coming in with a private money lender and the deal had enough room for us to be able to incorporate that to pay ourselves up front. So if anybody's wondering what that line is, that's kind of our internal line. The other thing to note on here is when you're looking at a pad split and you're evaluating it, you're going to need to get a builder's risk policy that's with it. And those are not inexpensive. This particular one was a little bit more than the $3,000 that we usually put in for the initial sniff. This one was about $3,800 for a a builder risk policy that most people don't realize needs to get done, whether you're fixing and flipping it. If you're turning it right into a long-term or a mid-term rental, you don't really need to get a lender's risk policy. You'll just have to replace the policy that's already in existence for the subject to deal. But you need to factor in the insurance costs for that. So once I start getting insurance quotes for long-term and mid-term rentals, I will typically put that number in here and start to use that, because you usually get a discount, right? You usually get a discount when you pay it in full. Sometimes because you're in a subject to deal, you're kind of mid-cycle. It depends on where you're at, but you need to replace that policy eventually. And typically when it's not going through escrow, you have to pay for that up front. Sometimes it doesn't, sometimes it does. Sometimes you can pay by month, but we allocate for that. But the lender's risk, there's no avoiding it. You have to pay it. And that's basically to insure the house during the construction portion of it, for liability, not only from someone who walks into the property that's under construction, or the workers that are actually in it. They should be bonded and insured, but you never know these days. So the lender's risk policy was a little bit more expensive. The transaction coordinator was a little bit more expensive. And to pull the thread on that a little bit is transaction coordinators are typically anywhere from $1,000 to $1,200 per deal. And typically that is something a wholesaler will pass on to the buyer to pay. We will usually put in there a minimum of about $2,400 just to account for that, because they have a TC that they already may have in place. I'm not going to necessarily utilize the same TC because it's a conflict of interest. Also, a lot of TCs are starting to charge both sides, which is rightful. I have no problem with that because they're doing work for both the initial wholesaler and the end buyer. And they're basically doing twice the work for two different teams and two different parties. So I have really no problem with that, but I just don't like that conflict of interest. So this particular deal was an HFA loan, and the wholesaler, who was not in sub two, didn't really realize that a title company is not going to be able to close that. Most title companies will not touch an HFA loan for subject to with a 100-foot pole. And so we would have to go through an attorney. You'd have to find a TC that would do that would be able to facilitate that. And it's typically more expensive. Now, in this particular case, he did not have a TC, but the $2,500 was because it needed to be basically self-performed to close that because it was HFA. And then secondarily, we had to go in there and redo all of the paperwork because there was no sub two addendums, there was no disclosures, there was nothing that was signed off by the seller. And so we had to redo the entire contract. So that's why that was a little bit inflated, but it was a little bit more expensive than we anticipated, because I would have been like, great, he doesn't have a TC, that's going to save me, $1,500, but because usually HFA, it's probably anywhere from $1,500 to $1,800 to get those closed. This one had a little bit of idiosyncrasies with it. The admin and marketing costs, these are the exit costs that I was talking about. That is typically that you encounter that if you're doing it yourself. If you're a wholesaler, you're not really worried about that. Your end buyers are. But these are costs that occur when you are going to dispose of the property as a buyer for whatever exit strategy you're using. So most property management companies will charge upfront to either a percentage or a flat fee to once they start marketing it and doing that. It just depends on the property management company of what style they do, but those costs need to be factored in. Here are my holding costs. That for 6 months it was about $9,000, and that brought me to a total of about $100,000 to get in this property from what we originally thought was going to be pretty much a layup at $60K. So if we're coming over to the right-hand side, this is where we have all of our deep analysis. And, the entry fee, the entry fee is a great debate. And some buyers will look at that as just some of the hardcore entry fees, and they don't consider closing costs and things of that nature as part of their entry fee. And I happen to disagree with that. That's just my opinion. I disagree with it because it is cash you're outlaying. It is not the cost of business. It's cash you're outlaying to get into that property, so it should rightfully be included in there. And we're really looking at entry fees all in. I know that everybody preaches 10%, which is for the main components, great. But we're looking at about 15% all in, and that's after taking into consideration all of our expenses. I'm sorry, all of our entry fee costs that people typically don't think of. So coming into this deal, I mean, it actually still was a deal. Even after the increased cost as a pad split, and you might find an operator that is okay with 11% on their return on their cash. And that's totally fine. If they have 100 grand sitting around and they want to put it in there and they want to get an 11% return, this technically still would have been a deal. This was not a deal for us, just because anything that we're going into, we're looking for a 15% cash on cash return on a pad split or a co-living, just because of the amount of work that goes into it with that return on your money. But that's just a personal preference. So once you start adding in other people's money, this had a negative cash on cash once we paid back the private money lender. And there is merit to the argument that if you're using other people's money and they're funding that entire thing, your returns are infinite, right? You're not outlaying any cash for this deal, and even a 1% return is infinite for you technically. But we take a look at this and we really want to see at least a 6% cash on cash using a private money lender, just for the fact that there is so much work that goes into a pad split and the operation of it, that the juice has got to be worth the squeeze. And then we do analysis on bringing in a PMP. And so over here on this side, we can look at here's my private money lender calculator as to what that is going to end up being. And then we have a private money partner. So then we can control what percentage of the cash flow we want to give them and what percentage of the equity that we want to give them. This was actually not a horrid deal for a private money partner. The returns were a little bit low, but you're also getting usually private money partners, from our experience, they want to see about at least a minimum of an 8%, 9% return on their money in addition to equity. But it's not awful because you still have an equity play that's in here that you have tax depreciation, you have other benefits that go into the broader analysis of this, that you have the loan pay down. So comprehensively, you're looking at this a little bit differently, and I'll go to that screen the last as to what we do. But this wasn't an awful deal for a private money partner, but I probably would have been very hard strung to get somebody to come in with a 5.7% return. And it's just not, for that size of a loan, it's probably just not a good enough return for me to be able to find someone to do that. So after the foundation issues that we knew were starting at about 10 grand, and where we saw the numbers were going, we pulled out of it. So we pulled out of doing the deal, and it just wasn't a fit for our buy box. When you're looking at this also as well, and I went a little bit long on this one. I'm sorry. I like to talk, but we break it down as to what our total return is going to be once we start getting into a deep dive on things. That we're looking at what our returns are 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years down the line, and where that cash on cash is going to end up going. We don't really necessarily focus on the first year alone, because we could have something that has a very poor cash on cash, but in the long term, and start 2, 3, 4, and 5, when you're looking at the total return on that, it starts to producing more deals than you initially probably would have said no to. because you have a value and appreciation. You don't bank on it, but you can have potential appreciation. You have your obviously your cash flow that's coming in from the property. You have the tax benefits of depreciation, and then you have your debt pay down. So all of those things combined for a decent return on investment. I don't have this built out yet where I'm taking into account using the three different scenarios where either you're using a private money lender or using a private money partner. It's to come, so that we can get a good comprehensive look at it. So before I kind of open it up for some questions, I'll go through where we were looking at the ARV, and I'm probably certain that a lot of people were thinking about that as, hey, I wanted to learn how to underwrite this. We are focused on underwriting and purchasing single family all the way through small multifamily up to 4 units. We're going to bring somebody in to do like larger multifamily and also some land analysis, just because it's not my sweet spot. I'd be hard strung to say that I can effectively underwrite a land deal. So we're going to bring in some experts and see if we can bring some value with that with those two specific areas. But as I was saying before, the ARV on a sub 2 deal is not of the utmost importance. It's important, but it's not of the utmost. You're looking at cash flow, but we will underwrite them and look at what the numbers come out to no matter what. So we look at both the ARV and also the FMV, which is the fair market value of what, as in the current condition, what is that appropriately priced at? And so there are two lines of thoughts with getting ARV. Some people take the top comp, and that's the bellwether. That's the one to reach for, and that's where they're coming up with their ARV. Sometimes we have 3 comps as our ARV, where they're all fixed and flipped, and they were in top of the market 2025 condition. So yeah, you can pick and choose which one. I tend to kind of honestly flip-flop between the two of them. This market actually was a bear to underwrite because there was no good comparables that were solid that had been flipped in this area. And I actually had to break one of my cardinal rules with underwriting, kind of bend it a little bit, I guess you could say, in order to get a comp, because there was no 2 stories. There was no 2-level properties that have been updated and fixed and flipped. And I did find one, but this particular property crossed a major road. So some of the takeaways on underwriting to get your ARV is you don't want to cross a major road. It's not a major highway, so it was kind of a major road, but it's in yellow, so it's a pretty busy road. But this looked like the same exact builder, and it was the same exact style. It was the same exact build style. It was within, I think, it was within a year of built. That's also one thing that you want to do is you want to stay within a 10-year build generation, so that you want to make sure that your property has been built within 10 years of your subject property. So it was too close of a match. It looked like it was the same exact builder that had built these. So I kind of broke that rule because it was pretty close by, and everything else matched up. But this was a pretty decent flip. They did a really good job. I just put a couple of pictures on there, but they did a really decent job of flipping this property. And so coming in here to the ARV is, the bedrooms count. I give 12,000 plus or minus for a bedroom. I know that some people give 10. I give 12 because that's what the cost of building a bedroom is when you're building it. Not building floating walls for a Padsplit. Bathroom is we usually use about 15,000 for the bathroom, like I said. Garages are huge, and it depends on what market you're in. So this is somewhat of a temperate climate, so a garage is not a make or break. But Garages are plus or minus 10,000, unless it's a market like Phoenix where it's critical to have a garage. Carports, you have to take all of those things into consideration. Living square footage, you want to make sure that you're within 250 square feet of your subject property. That can be fudged a little bit, I mean, if it's 257 square feet difference, it's not something I'm going to throw out, but the general rule is you want to go no more than 250 plus or minus. The lot square footage, you want to make sure that you're within 2,500 square feet. And that's a little bit more of a fudge factor for determining the value to your subject property, is if that occurs, which it did on this one, because you can see it was a little bit bigger. It was about 3,000 square foot difference. So I gave a lot adjustment on that. So you go in there and you figure out what lots are going for in that area, and you kind of back out the math from there to get a general sense of what that additional land an appraiser will give you for that additional land. So it was nominal. It was about a $2,500 bump to this property because it was bigger, but still you have to account for that. Like I was saying, in the year built, you need to make sure that it's within 10 years. Make sure it's the same construction style. I will never forget what Jamil told me is you want to make sure that you are, taking an apple from the same exact orchard, from the same exact tree, from the same exact grow season. And, you need to make sure that you're lining up all of these things to make sure that you're going to come out with an accurate ARV, because I see people that come up with ARVs that are just, I don't even know where they get the numbers, to be honest with you. Pools, traffic, commercial proximity. None of these properties had any of those, but traffic and commercial proximity can deduct thousands of dollars. It's about $10,000 for backing and siding. It's a little bit more. It's about 15,000 if you're fronting a very busy street. It can be up to 20,000 for traffic proximity when you are on an extremely busy street and you're fronting it. That's really a little bit subjective. You have to take a look at what the street is, and then you kind of get into whether there's an ADU. Is there a basement? Is it finished? If it's finished, you're only going to get about 50% of that value in that price per square foot. So you have to take that into consideration. So all of these things go into coming up with the ARV. And I had come up with the ARV on this thing is about 183,000 from this flip here, that at the time it sold in April. You want to make sure that you're within 180 days or less. Start at 90, go to 180. If you have to go beyond 6 months, it is, depending on where the market is, it is best to make sure that you're taking a deduction for that, for anywhere from a 10 to 15 to 20,000, 20% reduction in that, depending on where the market direction is. And you want to just make sure that you're getting as accurate as possible on your ARVs, because that is not only for a buyer, that's critical of the property value, but it's critical when you're trying to wholesale that deal, that you're accurate, because your buyer is going to rip you apart if you're coming with an ARV of 270,000 on this house because you're pulling the wrong comps, and they're going to come back and say, no, you don't know what you're doing, but this was a great comp. I'm very confident and secure with the one that I did find, even though I did jump that major road. It's close enough, and it wasn't like a major highway, but you can tell that it was the same builder, same exact style of house. Fair market value is a little bit different. Oops, sorry about that, guys. Fair market value is you're just looking for properties that are similar condition, and this put the property, this fair market value on this property here was probably about 56,000 over, 56,000 over what the fair market current value of that house was. So that did play a little bit of our decision to back out of the property. Is with subject to properties, you often fall into that. you often, you're getting a deal where you're having to put very little money into it usually. And it's kind of a balance. It's a seesaw. You're overpaying for the property a little bit, but you can't change the metrics of those underlying what was owed on that property, and whether you want to pursue it or not. So one last thing that I'll touch on is when I am looking at my ARV, I'm looking at the repair costs. So the general formula for your max allowable offer is your ARV minus repairs. I'm sorry, ARV times whatever the percent off market it is minus repairs, right? And I think a lot of wholesalers and buyers miss this portion of it, is because they use the stereotypical 70% ARV times 70%, which is missing some deals. It really depends on the market, and the market is what's going to dictate how much of a percentage off of ARV you're actually going to get, or striving for. This particular market was balanced. It had a 3.1 month supply of homes on the market. So it was a relatively healthy market, right? It was kind of in that middle space where it's not a buyer's market, it's not a seller's market, and it's kind of in that neutral zone. But what you do to figure that out is I use realtor.com, but I get the total number of listings that are for sale in the particular area. I take out the listings that are pending or contingent to see what is actually left on the market. And that's your true inventory of what is in that particular market and how many months of inventory that is. So if it's greater than 4 months, we can start going into 80% off of ARV. If it is less than 3 months and we have 1 or 2 months, then you're looking at more like I'm sorry, I said that backwards. So you're looking at 70% of ARV if it is a neutral market. If it is less than 3 months, you're looking at 80% off of ARV. If it is less than 6 months, if there's 6 months or more, you can go to 0.6, 60%. And if it's not, if it's a kind of a neutral market and it's between 3 and 6, you're looking at about 70% off of ARV, where you should start your offers. The rehab and repair costs, this is very subjective as well. The best thing to do is to get a contractor in there to see what the market rates are. I have general ones that work in pretty much most markets. But that's subject to whatever you're comfortable with. So I've defined a lipstick as something that is just predominantly patch and paint in a few areas. It's pretty much turnkey. It's good to go. You're looking at about $7 a square foot to paint and to get it rent ready. Cosmetic is really where you're doing some painting, some flooring redone in some areas. Countertops are getting updated. You're just refinishing the cabinets. You're not doing a complete remodel on the kitchen. You might refinish the showers. You're putting in some new fixtures. The landscape needs to get cleaned up. On a medium, what I've termed as a medium is that's more intensive. That's where you're basically coming in with all new flooring. You're doing new counters. You're doing new cabinets. You're basically doing a bath and kitchen remodel. And those costs per square foot are not the best to be able to gauge that, but it does give you a ballpark of your comfortability of knowing what that actual rehab is going to cost you. So at this point, I will stop and I will see if anybody has any questions or comments. Questions or comments? Osman, you got your hand up. Is that just sticking it up?
No. I was working on the underwriting deal similar to this. It's like right now it's the 3 bed, 5 bed, 5 bed, 3 bath, but they're looking to update, like do some renovations. Problem is like to make it like a 7 bed, 5 bathroom. Problem is their initial revenue is only like 900. So I'm kind of wondering if it's like, because construction is kind of going into their profits. So I'm kind of wondering how to go ahead with it,
To move forward with the deal.
how to move forward, if I should move forward or
So-
if I should just.
So it's $900 a month. Is that net per month?
That's that's after the like monthly taxes and stuff without the construction, without the renovation.
Where is the money coming from for the construction portion? Is self-funded or are they using a PML?
They didn't tell me about any PML. They're initially they're trying to initially like put it on Padsplit as is and then build up, then go for do some renovations and put
And
it
you said
back
it was
up.
what? You said it was 5 bedroom?
I have it right here. This is 5 bed, 2 bath
Okay.
at the moment.
Yeah. So with that, so I have a general rule with any of the pad splits. I know that pad split will go to 4 to 1. So it's 4 people to 1 bathroom. And that sounds like it's totally within ratio. I typically tend to stick to 3 to 1. It just makes people happier that they're not sharing a bathroom with that many people. 2 or 3 people is okay. When you start getting 4 people sharing a bathroom, it's an issue. So your ratio sounds like it is fine in there. If they're going to put it on as a 5 bedroom, you said it was what, 5'3"?
5'2".
5'2".
Sorry, I made a mistake there.
So we got a 5'2". Is one of the bedrooms a master bathroom? Because you're going to block off that entire room and you're going to have the 4 other people to that 1 bathroom, and that's kind of where I was driving at.
Oh, okay. So that's kind of an issue. Because the main issue I'm facing is either they'll get a lender to furnish it, but then their cash and cash with lending is like negative.
Yeah,
So I
yeah,
don't
it
think
happens.
they're.
It happens all the time.
Yeah.
Because we want to strive to get into the deal with obviously using other people's money and having
Yeah.
virtually nothing out of pocket, right? That will be the sauce that breaks every deal, is bringing in a private money lender and where your costs are exceeding, and that's where it goes negative.
Yeah,
So-
that's where their revenue goes into like negative 200 a month, kind of.
Yeah, and
So-
it happens on countless deals. I'd say 99% of the deals that we underwrite, we end up not moving forward with, to be honest with you, just to be transparent. 99% of the deals we don't move forward with, and we underwrite a ton of deals every single month. And it's just not, bringing in a private money lender will typically break it. It depends on what your aptitude is for how much that gets reduced. If it goes negative, it goes negative. And, no private money lender is going to lend you money when you're losing money every single month, right? Because they want to make sure that they get paid. They want to make
Yeah.
sure secondarily, how are you going to pay them back, right? And
Yeah.
if it
That's
goes
kind of
negative, you're not going to get anybody in their right mind that's going to lend you money. I mean, it's just the reality of it. But with when it starts getting low, like if you're getting like a 2, 3, 4% return with a private money lender, that's really where the buyers need to take a look at it and say, hey, you know what, this technically is an infinite return for us. We're not bringing any money into this. And so, yeah, it is a low return, but maybe we can catch up in a couple of years once we get this thing locked up and we take a 4% return for a couple of years. And then, in year 3, 4, we're starting to get a huge return on, and it's been infinite to begin with, to be honest with you. Yeah, I just, so where is their trouble point? So they're sticking it out there as a 5'2".
yeah.
Usually
Trouble-
you need at least 6 to 7 bedrooms to make a pad split really work. And one thing I forgot to mention. Does everybody have more time? We can go a little bit over an hour. All right,
I have
I'll
time.
take it that you haven't bailed on me. Let me share again. Because this is a really important underwriting factor, and I can't believe that I forgot about it, and I apologize. So when you're
Underwriting.
when you're looking at co-living here, so these are all my operating expenses. Padsplit changed their fee structure, which I'm sure that everybody who's been even sniffing around Padsplits is aware of. They've changed their fee structure so that they keep the first 10 days of any new move-in. And it's almost made it impossible to underwrite these things accurately because you have no idea whether you're going to get someone who's going to stay there for an entire year or someone who's going to be in and out in 2 to 3 months, right? And so you have that turnover every time that you have to pay that first 10 days, and Padsplit keeps it. And so I've broken this down where I've taken into account for the initial month and then month 2 and beyond. I have, just from like talking to a ton of other Padsplit operators, and Padsplit will tell you that they have an 8 to 9 month minimum occupancy average across, and I'm going to say bullshit. Everybody that I've ever talked to, including my own experience, is people are usually there for 5 to 6 months. So I put in there utilizing the first month fees that you have to pay in there for 2 a month. So I put it at an average of 6 months stay. So I have 2 of them. You can get easily burned if you have a high turnover market where you're not anticipating that, and your cash flow goes to shit because you have all of those initial months that are beyond what you had underwritten for. And so I think two a month, I'm sorry, 2 a year is pretty safe as far as, expecting everybody to turn over. But yeah, you can easily get burned on that. And when you're
I
coming in,
definitely see that happening with this one.
evaluate,
It's,
and when you evaluate that on the initial month, so you have the initial month move-in, you have the Padsplit fees, and then you have physical property management on top of that. If you can't self-manage it, that usually they'll give a little bit of a discount. So we all know that property managers charge between anywhere from 8 to 10%. Usually you can get a couple of percentage point discount on that because they're not sourcing tenants. They're not doing any of that. They're basically responding to, broken toilets and broken air conditioners and things like that. So they're really just physically managing the property. But you have those fees on top of it. So that's why the operating expenses are so high for a co-living and a Padsplit, is because of those initial booking fees that they call them. And also the fact that you have property management on top of it. It used to be an easy 8%, and then you added 7% on for property management, and it was about 15%. And then they changed it, and they've gotten a lot of backlash on it, but it's impacted people's profitability on them. But you can still make them work. You just need to factor that in and underwrite it. But to kind of go what I was saying before is really where that is, the break even point is about 7 months from what I understand for
it seems like up to
the
8,
new
9
fee
months.
structure,
Yeah.
right? And usually you have to have, in order to make it profitable, you have to have a minimum of 6, preferably 7 or 8 bedrooms in a property.
6 to 7 bed.
So
The problem I was mainly facing is because if they do any renovations or if they run into something, it's going to cut deep into their profits and put them to negative.
yeah,
Or
absolutely.
if they have like a
And
high
that's why
turnover rate. Yeah.
Have they done their due diligence on the back end, like making sure that they're accounting for CapEx and things of that nature? Because Padsplit, you have so many people in there, and number 2, you have so many people coming in and out. I usually bump up my repair percentages
Repair
and my
costs.
CapEx because they're hard on the property.
Yeah,
They're
because
always hard.
I kept monthly repairs at 300. I think I should bump that up.
Yeah, I absolutely would. But yeah, I mean, we Osman, we can talk offline about it, and I can see like what exactly is the
Yeah, definitely.
what the kind of the mechanics of the deal are, and see if I can give you some advice on
I
that.
can bring it up to you because I have some questions to ask the seller too. The other thing was like, how much percentage would you say like cash on cash is really good when it comes to like?
That is very subjective to answer. We have our standards, and I'd say as far as a generalization, most investors are looking for at least a 10% cash on cash return. It
10%.
fluxes from there, and it really depends
Yeah.
on the investor. I know people that'll buy, things that are 6% cash on cash all day long, because they want to take the additional benefits that come with real estate. So they have the appreciation, the depreciation, the loan pay down, things of that nature. It really is your buyers, and it depends on what kind of investor they are. But I would say, as general, a 10% or greater cash on cash return is what I would deem as good.
For like comps and stuff, would you look at square footage lot to be more worth like looking at, or would you look at like bed and bath count to be
For comps,
for comps?
1000% looking at square footage. It's got
Square
to be
footage,
within,
right?
in order for it to be a valid comp. So the further you go away from kind of those general rules and guidance that I gave, the further you get away from that, the more unreliable your comps are for what the actual
Yeah.
value is, right? And
Yeah, I run
square
into that
footage
a
is
lot.
absolutely one of them. It's got to be within 250 square feet of the subject property in order to be a good comp.
So,
And it's the
yeah, so
further you
square
go
footage
away from
matters
that,
a lot more.
because I've run into that scenario before where there's just nothing in this like neighborhood, and I can't find anything unless it's like 600-700 square foot difference. And sometimes you have to use them. You just have to know that your comp isn't solid, right? It's a good ballpark, but it's not the best comp of accuracy that you can have. And sometimes you
Yeah.
have to do that. I mean, there's just no way
Yeah,
around it. It's just nothing there.
Yeah, because the first deal I underwrote was like square footage was kind of off, and like Zillow would not give any pricing on the comps because I think it
Yeah.
was like a private state or something like that. I'm not sure what it's
Yeah,
called.
yeah, non-disclosure. Yep. We run into those all the time.
Non-disclosure
So
state, yeah.
my suggestion with that is when you run into non-disclosure states, because there's a few of them.
Yeah, there's quite a few.
I utilize Privy. I think Privy is the absolute best for comping and getting values of properties. That's all I pretty much use it for, is to see like what is pending on market, what is recent sales and things like that. I don't think there's anything out there that is comparable to it. They have a direct MLS agreement in most markets that you're getting
Wow.
MLS data directly versus like some of the other ones like PropStream, and
Yeah, I use PropWire a lot
I use
sometimes.
PropWire. I use PropWire too. PropWire actually is what I started using instead of PropStream to get
Yeah.
what the current loan was, because Privy is awful with that. Privy is absolutely dog shit with making sure that you have an accurate like existing mortgage and what that amount is and when it was originally taken. PropStream and PropWire are much better than that. I use them all the time to get that information, because Privy is just not reliable in my opinion.
And I think the last question I might have to reach out directly is more like things to request when a client comes over. I was kind of wondering about that. Like if I'm underwriting for someone else, what is like the initial things you would ask? Like, I'll probably go deeper into that. So
Yeah, no, it's a great question. Yeah, I mean, basically the answer to it is kind of a fluffy answer, but you want to get as much information as you can possibly get, because you can see that as I have them come in and we're underwriting these, we get them all sorts of different ways with limited and sometimes misinformation. You have to get as much information as you probably can, but as you possibly can. But you really fundamentally you need to know, are we talking strictly creative deals or are you looking at cash deals too?
just cash deals as well, because I'm
Okay.
probably gonna
Yeah.
underwrite a lot of
So
wholesale.
cash deals are a lot easier, right? Because
Yeah.
they're, you're not relying on getting third party information of what their
Yeah.
principals and interest is, their current interest rate, like all of that stuff. So, I mean, all of the main tenets of what was in my calculator of going through those to get them, you need to make sure that you know what the current interest rate is, what the principal and interest, taxes and insurance are. If you can get them broken down, that is best, for you to be able to accurately underwrite it instead of reverse engineering it and taking the time to do it.
Yeah.
you want to make sure that you have to know if there's any other liens, if there's any arrears, what the seller is looking for that breakdown. Because we end up getting on the recipient end of that. We get a lot of we just have it bundled together. We get basically little information, and we have it all bundled together. And just be like, hey, the entry into this is $22,000. All right, well, where is that money going? Like I need to know where those dollars are going for me to accurately underwrite it. But if you can get those types of things and push the deals that are coming to you for underwriting, to get as much information as possible is the best thing that I could say, is so that you can comprehensively make sure that you're analyzing it properly.
The last one was, I was kind of wondering, like, how can we get a copy of the calculator you're using?
That is a proprietary calculator. No, I'm going to put it on there in the market to sell it. There's been a lot of work and effort that has gone
Yeah, it's
into it.
different hours.
I want to build it out a little bit more to put some more functionality and bells and whistles in it. But I'm happy to share the initial sniff test one.
Yeah. This is a paid
so
one as
that-
well.
What's that?
I'm using a paid one. Someone built one on Excel, so that's kind of what I'm using right now.
Yeah, there's a lot of great calculators out there.
I need something better than what I have right now.
Yeah, I just found deficits in all of the calculators that I had. Michael Manatsatakian, I can never say his last name. He's a buddy of mine. He has a phenomenal calculator out there, but he charges quite a bit for it. But yeah, there's a lot of good calculators out there. I found that a lot of them, minus Michael's, I mean, his is pretty much spot on, like exactly like mine. He doesn't go as depth with Padsplits and co-living, but they just had deficits. They just were missing elements that we need in underwriting that weren't in there, and that need to be factored in. And I just kind of cobbled them together, and just from underwriting experience and what was missing from other calculators, and kind of made a super calculator with it. But yeah, if you want to request, I'm happy to share the initial sniff test one with you. And you can utilize that at least as kind of a a breaking in point, and hopefully it'll be able to be something that you could use.
I can probably share my info in the chat or something.
Yeah, and you can always email me directly. That's my personal email. That's up on this. I haven't changed it, but you can either email me or text me, and I'll be happy to send it over to you.
All right, sure. Yeah. Just this. All right.
All right.
All right,
Yeah, and
thank
if you have any other questions, ping me. I'm an open book. I'm more than happy to help. Kevin, did you have a question?
Yeah. With CapEx, so a few things. I also second the any bones you can throw around calculators. Like good places to, if there's a place you can browse various or other resources related to calculators. But my question, so when I'm underwriting long-term rentals, it's like 10% CapEx. Do you use a different rule of thumb for short-term, or how do you look at that?
No, you mean for short-term tenants, like a co-living? Yeah, a 10% CapEx is a little high. It really depends, but to give merit to you putting in 10%, it depends on the condition of the property, right? And you can get very far into the weeds, and that's actually one of the things that I wanted to add onto my calculator, is before I kind of put it out there to make sure it was 100% 360-degree comprehensive, is it depends on the condition of your property, right? If you have something that's like 4 or 5 years old, it's not going to need a new roof. It's not going to need a new AC unit unless you have something Rogo. It's not going to probably need a hot water heater. There's ages with all of those major components that I want to put into the calculator to be able to figure out what my ideal percentage should be for CapEx, just because you have the age remaining that it would be expected to be in use, right? And so it's really dependent on the condition of the property. If it's like I said, if it's something like 4 or 5 years old, I don't think that you need a 10% CapEx, unless there's something about the property that's
I'm looking at older stuff typically.
Older stuff, yeah, I will inch that up towards 10% CapEx if I know that, the roof hasn't been replaced in 15, 20 years. It's going to be coming up soon. I'm going to have that expense, so I will bump that up.
And that's
But,
including my vacancies. My CapEx, like, that's vacant, like, that includes like potential vacancies as well for how I'm kind of referring to that.
Okay, so you bundle those together. Yeah, I would recommend splitting those out. I know that there's a lot of calculators, there's a lot of underwriters that do that, is they bundle all of those things together. They bundle CapEx with vacancy. I've seen a lot of calculators with that, and I don't think that that is the wisest thing to do. I think that they should be separated so that you can nail down your numbers better, and you have a less of a chance and mitigate your risk of coming down the back end. Because once we get into a property and we actually get under contract, we do additional due diligence in this underwriting. So we're starting to go into get like vacancy rate, like what actually are the true vacancy rates. If it's something like Padsplit, that's difficult because you have comparable properties that are like in the co-living model. There's nothing out there that's going to be able to have like a realtor send you what the vacancy rate is for the area. But we'll start going in there like on a long-term rental. We'll start going in there to find out what the actual true vacancy rate is for that market, and put that number into our underwriting. We use, besides the fact that we typically use about a 5% or 6% average when we're initially underwriting it to get our numbers. That can definitely change as we do more due diligence and get in there. And 5 to 6% is probably good, but you can have markets that have a 2% vacancy rate. You can have markets that have a 10% vacancy rate. It really depends. Like, Phoenix here has changed dramatically over the past couple of years. It's a renter's market. And so vacancy rates have gone up probably about 2 or 3 percentage points from 2 years ago. And so whenever I have a property that's in Maricopa that, I know like the back of my hand, I will bump that up to probably about a 7 or 8% vacancy rate, because it's become such a renter's market with all the huge multifamily that have been built and flooded the market. And it's kind of weakened a little bit. But yeah, I would suggest splitting those apart and separating them, and then kind of playing with those numbers depending on the market and the condition of the house for your CapEx portion.
Yeah. Okay. So for markets where there's not Padsplit showing on their website, Seattle, Minneapolis are two that come to mind. Is it just you're left with VRBO, Airbnb, and like Craigslist, or is there other like competitors that are worth looking into?
Yeah, it's a great question. They have a list of about 100 markets that they are considered Padsplit anywheres. And the first thing that we do is I know what Padsplit for co-living, how they come up with their numbers. They look at studio, and if there's no studios, 1-bedroom apartments,
Yeah,
and then
20.
they take 20 to 25% off of that
Yeah.
for what the current monthly rate is, and then they divide it by 4.3 to get the weekly rate. So I agree with it for the most part, but they typically go into Rent Cafe, and they also go into what's the other one? Zoom something. Hang on, let me just get it up real quick. I don't use it besides Padsplit. So Zumper.com, ZUMPER.com. And then
Okay.
Rent Cafe. So they will take a look at those, and they will like I said, from a studio, or if there's no studios, a 1-bedroom, and they'll back it down because they don't have, typically they're not furnished. Typically you have to pay for your own utilities, and you're not doing that in a Padsplit. So they take about 20 to 25% off, and that's where they kind of start. The last layer to that is I always put it, I mean, I got a pretty good relationship with Zach with Padsplit, so I can ping him all the time. Like I probably ping him 3 or 4 times a week, asking him like, hey, I came up with this number. Do you agree with this? And most of the time he does, because he's using the exact same thing that he basically trained me in what they're looking at. But yeah, it's a little bit of a challenge with markets that have no Padsplits or no onboarding Padsplits to kind of determine that. So you have to utilize those two resources. I never go to a short-term rental, like Airbnb or VRBO, and utilize any of those numbers ever. They're too inflated. They're a different strain. They're a different market. You're not going to get somebody in a pad split for the demographic that gravitate towards them, that is going to pay what a VRBO or an Airbnb divided out is going to be, and taking a percentage off that. I mean, if you took like probably 40% off it, maybe you'd be able to use it, but I've never done that.
The other thing is I'm reaching out to about a lot of commercial properties, commercial rental properties, so 5 or greater
Yep.
units, and they're selling, like comps are showing us selling, but they're like some of them are negative, some of them are break even, some are like 3.5% cash on cash. So there's buyers for them at those crappy rates. Yet, like you said, and like I've heard before, double digit cash on cash is kind of like what you want to be at, 10 or above. And so I'm wondering, like, where's the disconnect? Like, why are people buying shit that doesn't make money? It doesn't make sense to me.
Well, so I'm not an expert at multifamily commercial. So anything over 4 units, I've been through Bo's training. I've spent some time with Bo. It's just not my focus, and it hasn't been something that I'm comfortable that I would be able to really delve in as like a SME on, subject matter expert. But from my understanding is they're more looking at the cap rate of the property than they are cash on cash return
Yeah, they are.
for the particular property when it's large multifamily. But yeah, I mean, multifamily, like commercial multifamily, is in a free fall. Like, I mean, it's bleeding everywhere. I think we're going to see another wave of that, with people defaulting on their loans. But yeah, I can't speculate as to why they're buying them unless they're trying to buy on the downside, hoping that they're going to get a rebound and this is temporary. But I just personally don't think so.
Okay, cool. Appreciate that.
All right. Anybody, Ron, you have a question, buddy?
Yes, James, thank you for taking my question.
Yeah.
You already kind of spoke upon this, but I'm going to ask anyway. So I have a potential opportunity to take a church, a 4,000 square foot church, and convert it into a pad split. So I've already done some due diligence on it. My only roadblock right now is trying to find a comp for it, or trying to comp it in general. So I don't, short of going after a commercial appraiser, I don't know if there would be another way that I can like kind of get a rough estimate of how.
Yeah, that's a tough nut. Yeah, because you have 2 totally different original uses, right? And I mean, it would be almost impossible to get a comp to that unless you were looking at it from the perspective of what other, like, six bedroom houses, or how many bedrooms. I mean, you must be able to get a shitload of bedrooms in there, right?
16.
Holy shit. Wow, that would be the biggest one I've ever heard of. That's
Yeah,
crazy. That'd be
that
awesome.
is crazy.
That's like
16.
a apartment complex.
Yeah, yeah. So, and
That's pretty
actually,
cool.
I already know how I'd have to rezone it with the city, and I had already had a pad splitting GC come out and draw it up for me and everything. So I'm just waiting to kind of get some comparables. So the seller, he thinks he did it. He pulled his comparable data from Zillow. So I'm like, no, that's
Yeah.
not how it works. Yeah. So that's why I'm trying to
So
get.
the reason that you're needing to get a comp on it is because, are you going to be going after, once it's like rehabbed, you're going to be like DSCR and basically burr it?
Well, yes.
Okay. That's a good challenge. I would like to accompany you on this challenge to try to figure it out.
You're
Yeah,
more than
because
welcome to, sir.
that is a very difficult one to answer, because number one, you're talking 2 different zonings, right? You're getting it zoned for a completely different use. And secondarily, there's probably not a lot of comps that have, I mean, you're never going to get a comp that has 14 bedrooms or 16 bedrooms. That would be a very interesting one. That would probably be over my skis to try to speculate on how to do that, but I would love the challenge to try to figure that out with you.
Yeah, for sure. I welcome it.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I hope that goes. Yeah, keep me in the loop or reach out to me.
Sure.
I would love to stay in contact and see how you kind of go through that journey. I don't even know how we would get a fair market value. Like if you go to a lender, I mean, how are they even going to be able to find comps that are going to support what the value is?
And there's my roadblock, right? I can't
Right.
go to anybody until I get some numbers in. So
Right. And at least say I have a rough idea.
right.
I like it.
Well, I
Yeah,
got your
that's
contact info for sure. I will definitely keep you in the loop if
yeah. I would
the
love to,
suggestions,
even if we
obviously.
just
So
brainstorm it, because I mean, I'll admit that's over my skis of how to try to figure that out with that complexity of a project. But I would definitely love to help you out and figure that along the way. I love those
Thank you.
rogue ones that you have tough time comping.
Yeah, that's a challenging one.
Yeah, for sure.
Do we have any connection with like a commercial agent in that area? Because
I
I would probably
do.
reach out
He's
to them, calculate the square footage pricing on there,
yes, yeah.
and
So I have
calculate accordingly.
yeah, I reached out to a contact, a fellow investor, and he has commercial ties with other, I believe it's a commercial broker. So he's been trying to nab someone to help with this.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's a good one.
that's a bit of
That's a really good one.
I love these though.
Yeah, on my
Yeah.
first Zoom, you stumped me. That's good. I like it. But yeah. So hopefully you guys got some value out of this tonight. I'm really open to take feedback. If you want to give me feedback on what a better structure would be, if you want to actually go through like examples and do them live, or if it like doing a case study, it's a little bit easier just because there's so many pieces of software and all over the place, and it's tough to share screens and do stuff like that. But I'm definitely down for it. Yeah. So if you have any comments, definitely give some feedback as to how we can make this better and how we can add value to you guys and assist and getting your underwriting skills better. It's a little bit of a mixture of an art form and a science. It really is. It's a little bit of experience and a little bit of an art form and a little bit of a science of knowing where to go to get the data and how to putting it in. And it's fundamentally, it boils down to, it's really not that difficult. You just need to make sure that you can do accounting, and that's basically it. Is really the core of it, is just making sure that you're a good accountant. But all right, guys, if there's no other questions, I appreciate you all being here. Thank you so much. I will see you next week. And like I said, reach out to me for anything, and please give some feedback and let me know if there's something you'd like to see and something for me to go over.
Thank you, James. This
Thank you,
was really good.
James. Thank you very much.
All right.
A lot.
Take care, guys. Thank you.
Good night.